this video, we're going to make our dashboards far more interactive by adding slicers. Rowan would like to be able to filter all of the visualizations on the renewable capacity tile by region. But because we've turned off the field buttons and we can't currently see the pivot tables, it isn't really possible. Fortunately, the solution is really simple. We're going to add a slicer. Now, we've actually seen slicers before. If you come to your drill down tab, we've got a slicer by region here. So if I click Eurasia, it filters not just this chart, but all of the visualizations on this dashboard. And if I click the clear filter, it removes that filter. Now we actually need to create this slicer from scratch. So I'm going to select it and press delete. And then we're going to come back to our dashboard. To add a slicer, you'll need to select either a pivot table or a pivot chart. We're going to select our capacity by year pivot chart. And then we're going to come up to our pivot chart analyze tab. And in the filter group, you'll see there are two slicers we can add. A timeline slicer, which is great when you need to filter by date information, but you have to have complete dates, not just a year. And we have the insert slicer, and this actually allows you to filter by any field in your data. So that's the one we're going to go for. Now we could add as many slicers as there are fields, but we just want a region one. So I'm going to take region and say OK. And as we saw before, if I choose one of the values in the slicer, so Europe for example, it has now filtered the data to show me the values for Europe. If I wanted to see the values for Europe and North America, if I click the multi-select button, that will allow me to select multiple items. When I turn the multi-select off, you'll see if I now select Asia, it clears the other two. To clear the filter entirely, I click the clear filter. So incredibly intuitive to work with. There are just two problems with this slicer. First of all, it doesn't really tie in with the look of my dashboard. Second of all, it's only linked to the one pivot chart at the moment. Right, we're going to fix both of those and we'll start with the formatting. So making sure your slicer is selected, we're going to come up to the slicer ribbon and you should see a gallery of slicer styles on the left-hand side. And if you click the drop down, it'll give you a few more options. The dark options are a little bit brighter, so if I choose that one, it looks a little bit nicer, but still a lot of white for this dashboard. So coming back to my slicer styles, I'm going to click the drop down. If you don't like the options available, you can either add a brand new slicer style where you start from scratch, and it's actually quite a lot of work, or a little bit easier, grab a slicer style that's close to what you want, duplicate it, and then modify that. And that's what we're going to do. So coming back to our dark sky blue slicer, we're going to right click and duplicate. We're going to call this one dash. And then the first thing we're going to change is our slicer as a whole. So make sure that's selected and click Format. We'd like our fill to be black. We're going to come to border. We don't want a border, so we're going to say none. And then coming to font, we're going to make it white and size 8. And then I'm going to click OK. Now we'd also like to change our selected item with data. Those are the blue buttons, the one we've actually highlighted. I'm going to click Format. Our font is already white, so that's okay. We don't need to worry about the border, and the fill is also fine. So that's all good. And then the last one we're going to look at is an unselected item with data. And we're going to click Format. Now, we actually want these to be a very dark grey. So I'm going to choose the dark grey. And let's just check the font. Yeah, we need that to be white as well. And then we're going to say OK. And that's all we need to do for now, so I'm going to say OK. Now that style has not actually been added to this slicer yet, so I'm going to come back up and under Custom, you'll now see you have a custom style called Dash, and when you click on that, you can apply it. So that's looking much better, except for the header where we didn't change our font color, but that's okay because we actually want to turn that header off altogether. And to do that, we're going to come back to our slicer ribbon, come across to slicer settings on the far left, and untick display header. You can also change your sort order And you can hide items with no data. We don't have any at the moment, but we're going to turn that on in case and say OK. One final tweak. Slices by default show the filter options as a single column, but you can actually change this. So I'm going to come up to columns and we're going to set that to 4 columns. And then I'm going to change my width to about a 14 and my height to, let's say, 1.9 fits. And then I can just move my slicer down into place. So formatting all looking great. Now we just need to see how we can link it to our other pivot charts. So with your slicer still selected, back on your slicer ribbon, we're going to come to Report Connections. And this is what makes slicers so brilliant. You can actually link them to any of the pivot tables and of course the related pivot charts that share the same pivot cache. And usually that means all the pivot charts and slicers from the same data set. And this is why it's often a good idea to give them sensible names, but in this case, we actually want to link it to all of them. So this is not just going to affect this dashboard, but our drill down as well. And then we're going to say, OK. If I now select Asia, it is filtered not just my original pivot chart, but all of the charts on this tile. If I wanted to select Asia and Eurasia, I don't have my headers anymore, but I can just use my control key and that will select multiple values. And if I wanted to select all of them again, I can click back on Africa, hold my shift key down, click on South and Central America, and it effectively removes the filter. So slicers allow us to create a very intuitive way of interacting with the dashboard. For your optional homework, add a slicer for our top 5 investment and jobs in renewable energy so they can be filtered by year.